It's almost a cliché that child stars lead tragic lives, but with a lot of these stories, the devil's in the details. You know these names, but you might not know how strange and sad their stories got.
Best known as Joey Russo on the 90s sitcom Blossom, Joey Lawrence earned acclaim from a young age, as well as a lifetime of people mocking his catchphrase, "Whoa!"
Whoa!
Following Blossom, he landed several more roles in which he played characters named Joe, Joey, or JJ. Starting in 2010, he starred as one of the title characters on the ABC family sitcom Melissa and Joey, a show about a man trying to find a job after bankruptcy. 2 years after that show was gone, so was most of his money, as he and his wife Chandy Yon Nelson had overspent so much that they had to file for Chapter 7 bankruptcy in 2017. Lawrence listed $43,907.32 in assets and a staggering $355,517.27 in liabilities. After the dust settled, Us Weekly reported that they were left with a little more than $52,000 to pay all their creditors. In 2018, Lawrence's production company was auctioned off, netting a high bid of $56,000. The buyer has all rights to Lawrence's songs, residuals, and royalties of all work before his bankruptcy. Gary Coleman was once the highest-paid star on television, thanks to his role as Arnold Drummond on Diff'rent Strokes, for which he earned around $70,000 per episode. So how could it be that this highly recognizable actor would end up declaring bankruptcy in 1999? According to Coleman, the blame lay with himself, as well as his accountants, adoptive parents, agents, and lawyers. His financial situation got so bad that he even had to take a job as a mall security guard to make ends meet. And when that wasn't enough, he tried for fame again by running for governor of California in 2003. Coleman passed away in 2010, having spent a significant amount of money on medical bills and a lengthy legal battle against his parents. Owing to handwritten revisions to Coleman's will shortly before his death, his former girlfriend and manager, Anna Gray, laid claim to his estate. But so did his ex-wife, Shannon Price, leading to a legal mess. As Gray's attorney explained to ABC News, "It's a survivor death benefit that Ms. Price has already grabbed, potential book deals and movie rights. His present assets pale significantly in comparison to what may be garnered. It could potentially be millions." Dustin Diamond was haunted by his character on Saved by the Bell, Samuel "Screech" Powers. He played him in 10 different spin-offs, reboots, and parodies, from Good Morning Miss Bliss in 1988 to his fake adult film, Screeched, Saved by the Smell, which was produced to try to save his house from foreclosure. When that didn't work, he tried to sell t-shirts with his face on them. Before Diamond became an adult, he was already in debt. He credited his 2001 bankruptcy to his parents' spending and a substantial tax miscalculation. He listed his income at about $5,300 a month, much of it going to propping up his real estate obligations. On top of that, he had significant medical bills after his girlfriend's failed pregnancy in 2005. After he was released from prison for stabbing someone in 2014, he reportedly told his former co-star Mario Lopez, "I want to put the tomfoolery and malarkey behind me for that clean slate. Time for a change." Tragically, Diamond passed away from stage 4 cancer in February 2021. All evidence suggested that he was making good on his promise to Lopez, as his net worth before his death was reportedly an estimated $300,000. Corey Haim rocketed to stardom in the 80s in films like Lucas and The Lost Boys, becoming one half of the two Coreys, along with fellow child star Corey Feldman. So how in 10 years did he go from fighting vampires to fighting bankruptcy? The answer was addiction. He turned to drugs both for partying and to cope with his struggles. His addiction became a liability as the drugs inhibited his talent. In a 1997 bankruptcy filing, Haim listed debts of nearly $104,000 to the IRS and $100,000 for state taxes and medical expenses. His assets consisted of an old car, $750 in clothing, and $7,500 in residuals and royalties. After 15 rehab stints, he went so far as to cut his hair and pull out his own teeth to sell them online. When he passed away in 2010, he was still in such dire financial straits that his family asked his fans to help cover funeral expenses. They also claimed that the City of Toronto stepped in to help cover the expenses, although the city announced in a press release that they never received an application for that assistance. Leif Garrett first broke into the public eye in the 1969 film Bob and Carol and Ted and Alice, and then he kept bouncing around screens both big and small. In 1976, he became a double threat when he signed a recording contract, but his musical career was pretty much over while he was still a teenager. When he was 17, he crashed a car while inebriated, resulting in his friend Roland Winkler's partial paralysis. A judge awarded Winkler $3.9 million in damages, though the jury made Garrett pay only $15,000 in punitive damages.
I've, for the longest time, wanted to tell you that I'm so sorry that this happened.
In 2001, Garrett filed for personal bankruptcy, listing his only income as a monthly $1,000 gift from his mother and his only possessions as household goods. He was in the red with $76,198 in unpaid credit card bills. He was eventually able to get his life back on track, but his recording contracts have prevented him from ever seeing any royalties. David Cassidy rose to fame as Keith Partridge on the 70s musical sitcom The Partridge Family. He grew up around show business, as both of his parents were also actors. He also had a significant music career in addition to his acting, as he scored 2 #1 singles and sold 30 million records worldwide. He even had more members in his fan club than the Beatles or Elvis Presley, and by the age of 21, he was the highest-paid solo performer in the world. But as Cassidy's teenage fans grew up, he struggled to do the same. He had a series of DUI arrests and then court-mandated rehab that never succeeded for very long. He also had a more challenging time finding work as an adult, though he spent his money as if he were still a huge star. In 2015, he filed for bankruptcy, auctioning off his mansion for $1 million loss. He reportedly had debts of at least $10 million, portioned out between bank loans, credit cards, and $102,000 to a lawyer. At the time of his death in 2017, CelebrityNetWorth.com estimated his finances at $500,000, though he also had debts totaling $186,840. He left his estate to his son, Beau, along with $1 million in life insurance and a $450,000 retirement account, while completely cutting out his daughter, Arrow actress Katie Cassidy. In the 70s, Willie Ames was one of the most prominent child stars around, thanks to his starring role of Tommy Bradford Jr. on the sitcom 8 is Enough. At the peak of that show, he was making over $1 million a year. But like so many other former child stars, he eventually turned to drugs, as his addictions escalated from heavy drinking to marijuana and then cocaine. And those weren't his only troubles. After following his accountant's advice to invest in a coal mine, Ames ended up owing $400,000 to the IRS, which forced his house into foreclosure. He eventually even ended up sleeping under parking garages and bushes. As he told The Wrap in 2015, "When I was at my lowest, I had no phone, no computer, no car, and $5 in my pocket." Ames managed to find jobs in construction and as a cruise director before eventually becoming a financial planner and motivational speaker. He also moonlit as the Christian superhero Bible Man from 1995 to 2004, until an injury forced him out of the role and toward a painkiller addiction, as he revealed in his memoir, Grace is Enough.
5-year-old Heather O'Rourke was eating in the cafeteria at MGM Studios one day in the early 1980s, waiting while her sister Tammy was filming a movie. It was there that she was scouted by blockbuster filmmaker Steven Spielberg, who was producing the 1982 horror movie Poltergeist. He thought that O'Rourke, who at the time had a resume consisting of a single episode of Fantasy Island, would be right for the part of Carol Ann Freeling, a girl who would be kidnapped by evil forces through a closet. Poltergeist would prove to be a hit, and O'Rourke would go on to appear in a few episodes of TV shows like Webster and Happy Days, but most notably reprised the role of Carol Ann in 2 Poltergeist sequels. In February 1988, O'Rourke reported abdominal pain so severe that her parents quickly took her to Children's Hospital of San Diego. The 12-year-old actor died during surgery from what doctors diagnosed as complications of intestinal stenosis, a serious obstruction of the small intestine that O'Rourke had dealt with since birth, but had gone undiagnosed. The family's attorney filed a lawsuit alleging medical malpractice.
What they thought she had was a bowel inflammation. What she actually had was an obstruction.
That blockage allowed an infection to develop, which had stopped the actor's heart. Poltergeist 3 arrived in theaters in June 1988, 4 months after O'Rourke died. As the daughter of film producer and novelist Dominic Dunne and the brother of filmmaker and An American Werewolf in London star Griffin Dunne, Dominique Dunne was properly set up for movie success. Between 1979 and 1981, she slowly broke into Hollywood with a succession of roles in the TV movies The Day the Loving Stopped and Valentine Magic on Love Island. She also landed episodic work on shows like Lou Grant and Family. Dunn found her breakthrough role in the 1982 horror movie Poltergeist, portraying teenager Dana Freeling, part of a family whose home is beset by evil spirits. She filmed and taped several more episodes of TV shows like Chips, Hill Street Blues, and V, most of which would air after her death. In 1982, Dunn broke up with her boyfriend John Sweeney, rejecting his possessive and violent behavior after he'd attempted to strangle her once before. When Dunn tried to break things off for good, it sent Sweeney into a rage. He lured her out of her home and strangled her again. After days in the hospital, Dunn never regained consciousness. He was later convicted of voluntary manslaughter and served just a few years in prison. Dunn was 22 years old when she died. Before MTV's TRL disappeared, it popularized boy bands, making huge stars out of the Backstreet Boys and NSYNC. But just as MTV got into the boy band business, they were also mocking the fad. In 2000, it aired the TV movie Together, about a manufactured five-guy group of the same name. It spawned a TV series, a book, and albums. Together even hit the road as Britney Spears' opening act. Like other boy bands, Together included an adorable baby-faced member, Jason QT McKnight, portrayed by actor and singer Michael Cuccione. He'd appeared in single episodes of just 2 other series before he began playing QT full-time in 2000. In childhood, Cuccione was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, a form of cancer. By the age of 10, doctors pronounced him to be cancer-free. His illness was even something they'd written into the show as a joke.
It's also not true that I'm still dying. Seriously? Just kidding, I am.
But in late 2000, 15-year-old Cuccione and his mother were involved in a car accident, which led to the singer checking into British Columbia Children's Hospital for surgery to repair a damaged diaphragm. While under medical supervision, he developed pneumonia. His lungs had grown so irreparably damaged from the chemotherapy treatments he endured that he wasn't able to breathe without a machine. In January 2001, 8 days after his 16th birthday and while the Together series was still running, Cuccione died after respiratory failure. When Oscar-nominated filmmaker Richard Linklater wanted to remake the 70s comedy The Bad News Bears in 2005, he had to find an actor for the role of star youth baseball pitcher Amanda Wurlitzer, hopefully someone who is as good at baseball as she was at reading lines. Linklater found his candidate in Sammy Kane Kraft, who hurled a 75-mile-an-hour fastball at her audition. Kraft was 13 years old when The Bad News Bears was released, marking both her professional acting debut and also her final film. Kraft later attended high school in Woodland Hills, California, played softball, and formed a band, Scary Girls. In the early morning hours of October 9, 2012, Kraft was riding in an Audi going over the speed limit on a freeway in Los Angeles. The driver hit a semi-truck from behind, and their Audi was then also hit by another vehicle. Kraft was rushed to Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, where she was pronounced dead. Kraft was 20 years old. The driver was later arrested on a charge of felony drunk driving. After a career on stage that had begun at the age of 6, Tommy Rettig moved on to movies in 1950, co-starring in more than a dozen, including The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T and River of No Return. But none of those films had the cultural reach of one of the most famous fictional dogs in history. Rettig edged out more than 500 kid actors to win the role of Jeff Miller in 1954's Lassie TV series. Rettig stayed with Lassie for 3 years until the plot shifted. The Millers took in an orphan named Timmy but left the family farm, leaving both Lassie and Timmy behind to live with the Martins, Timmy's new adopted parents. Rettig showed up occasionally on TV shows in the 1960s, but disappeared until his final role, returning to the character of Jeff Miller in the final episode of The New Lassie in 1992 in an episode he co-wrote.
I had a Lassie of my own once. She was very special.
Throughout his life, he found work as a photographer, computer programmer, and gym manager while publicly advocating for the legalization of marijuana. On February 15, 1996, Rettig's body was discovered at his home in Marina del Rey, California. An initial autopsy attributed the death of the former actor to natural causes. Rettig was 54 years old. An instant hit upon its debut in 1986, the sitcom Alf launched a pop culture phenomenon. Based around a hip, wisecracking alien puppet, the title character hid out on a suburban home of the Tanner family, annoying all of his human hosts except for young Brian Tanner, portrayed by child star Benji Gregory. Before Alf, Gregory landed some supporting roles in live-action TV. After Alf ended in 1990, he contributed his voice to the animated Back to the Future TV series and Once Upon a Forest. In adulthood, he abandoned acting and enlisted in the U.S. Navy, where he worked as a weather forecaster on an aircraft carrier. According to Gregory's sister, the former actor's body was discovered in his car on June 13, 2024, next to that of his service dog, outside of a bank in Peoria, Arizona. Writing on Facebook, she recounted, "We believe he went there the evening of the 12th to deposit some residuals and never got out of the car to do so. He fell asleep and died from vehicular heat stroke." Gregory was 46 years old. With a $102 million box office haul, Mary Poppins was far and away the top-grossing movie of 1964. The Disney adaptation of the classic children's novel about a magical nanny won Julie Andrews an Academy Award and shot its child stars to fame, including 8-year-old Matthew Garber. Before playing Michael Banks, Garber had appeared in only one other project, the forgettable 1963 magical cat movie The 3 Lives of Thomasina. After Mary Poppins raised his stature, Garber made just one more film, the 1967 family comedy The Gnome Mobile. In the 1970s, Garber embraced a hippie lifestyle and headed to India, where a number of enclaves established by like-minded Americans and Europeans had developed. While traveling around India in 1976, Garber acquired hepatitis. According to the actor's brother, it was unknown how that happened, but it was most likely from consuming tainted meat. By the time Garber's family persuaded him to return home to England for medical treatment in 1977, it was too late. The disease had taken hold and irreparably damaged his pancreas. In June 1977, Garber died of hemorrhagic necrotizing pancreatitis at the Royal Free Hospital in London. He was 21. John Paul Stoyer showed up on a handful of TV series in the late 1980s and early 1990s, including Day by Day, Star Trek The Next Generation, and The Wonder Years. When ABC built a sitcom around popular stand-up comic Brett Butler in 1993, 9-year-old Stoyer was cast as Butler's character's gentle young son, Quentin Kelly. The show, Grace Under Fire, was a top 10 hit and earned Stoyer a nomination at the Young Artist Awards in 1995. But in 1996, after 3 seasons, he left the series. Butler's on-set behavior had grown unacceptable, including an alleged incident in which she exposed herself in front of Stoyer. The role of Quentin was aged up and recast with replacement actor Sam Horrigan. Stoyer permanently quit acting. He later switched to music and adopted the stage name Johnny P. Jules while performing with various bands. He also launched a popular restaurant in Portland. On January 1, 2018, according to an investigation by Portland police, Stoyer died by suicide. The former child star was 33 years old. The 3 kids on CBS's smash hit Everybody Loves Raymond were played by the same 3 young actors for the entirety of its nearly decade-long run, real-life siblings Madeline, Sullivan, and Sawyer Sweeten. They all took home $100,000 per episode paychecks by the end of the series, but Sawyer Sweeten in particular faced financial problems a decade later. He never appeared on screen again after Everybody Loves Raymond and was deeply in debt by 2015. After a business he formed didn't take off, he didn't have income when California issued a lien to recover unpaid taxes. Desperate and depressed, Sweeten died by suicide on April 23, 2015, at the home of a relative in Austin, Texas, the place the actor was born and raised. Madeline Sweeten said in a statement to Variety, "This morning, a terrible family tragedy has occurred. We are devastated to report that our beloved brother, son, and friend, Sawyer Sweeten, took his own life. He was weeks away from his 20th birthday."
When Ryan Grantham killed his mother in cold blood on March 31, 2020, he thought it was an act of mercy, as reported by CBC. Soon after, he packed his car with a dozen Molotov cocktails and guns with the intention of assassinating Prime Minister Justin Trudeau or targeting students at his university. Grantham knew he was capable of murder. However, Grantham thankfully never managed to pull off his other planned homicides, instead choosing to turn himself in to the police. No child star's fall from grace is quite like Grantham's, as in September 2022, he was sentenced to life behind bars. Psychiatric evaluations concluded that he struggled with a mood disorder, alcohol abuse, and heavily used marijuana in months before the murder. He is known for his roles in Diary of a Wimpy Kid and Riverdale, and also appeared in the series Supernatural. According to TMZ, Grantham, who recorded his murder plans on his GoPro camera, is afraid of being abused in a tough prison environment. If the name Ricardo Medina Jr. doesn't ring a bell, his red Power Ranger suit might. In 2002, Medina played Cole Evans, the Red Lion Ranger, on Power Rangers Wild Force. He also did some notable voice work for other Power Rangers productions and made some appearances on CSI and ER. In a shocking turn of events, he was sentenced to 6 years in prison in 2017 for killing his roommate with a sword, according to NBC News. Medina said it was in self-defense, but he ultimately pleaded guilty to voluntary manslaughter charges and took up the opportunity for a smaller sentence. Medina and the victim, Joshua Sutter, had a heated argument that began over Medina's girlfriend. After the fight became physical, Medina and his girlfriend took refuge in his bedroom, according to BBC News. When Sutter reportedly kicked down the door, Medina stabbed him with his sword. Sutter's father was present at the trial and had a few choice words for Medina. He stated that Medina deserved a prison sentence and deserved his reputation to be completely and permanently destroyed.
Everyone that looks at Ricardo from now on will never see him as a celebrity.
Drake Bell was once one of Nickelodeon's most reliable heartthrobs from 2004 to 2007. At its peak, according to Variety, 3 million people tuned in to watch his show, Drake and Josh. That Golden Boy era came to a close in 2010, when Bell experienced his first brush with the law, a DUI, for which he received a conviction, notes the Los Angeles Times, although it's unclear if he spent any time in jail. In 2016, he became a second-time offender and was sentenced to 4 days in jail, as well as 4 years of summary probation, although he only spent 1 night behind bars. But that wasn't the worst of it. Bell came back into the news in 2021 after being sentenced to 2 years of probation and 200 hours of community service for felony child endangerment, reports Variety. 4 years earlier, when he was about 31 years old, Bell had contacted an underage girl on social media and had met her in person at his concert. The messages Bell had sent her were deemed by law enforcement sexual in nature. The victim reported him to the police in 2018, and Bell eventually pleaded guilty. Bell, who is married with a child, later said in an Instagram video that the online relationship ended when he learned of the victim's age, and maintained that no sexually explicit images had been swapped, according to The Hollywood Reporter. Shia LaBeouf has had a long, scandal-plagued road since his Even Stevens days, but his legal troubles began before he was a Disney star.
And the guy's like, "What are you in here for?" I'm like, "Cabaret."
His first arrest came when he was only 9 years old, when he was suspected of stealing a pair of Nikes, according to an essay he wrote for the book Prison Ramen. After another arrest during childhood, LaBeouf's first major infraction came in 2007, when he attempted to stab his neighbor and spent 2 days in jail, notes the Los Angeles Times. Other entanglements with the law that occurred in his early 20s included a DUI and a couple of bar fights. In one incident in 2014, LaBeouf was arrested after interrupting a performance of Cabaret and hitting Alan Cumming on the rear end. According to CNN, he was released from jail the next day. In the following years, he had several misdemeanor charges, including public drunkenness, jaywalking, and a few others that involved physical assault. The real test of LaBeouf's career came in 2020 when FKA Twigs, a musician and LaBeouf's ex-girlfriend, sued him for abusive behavior, reports the New York Times. Among the allegations were that LaBeouf choked her while she was sleeping and knowingly infected her with an STD. LaBeouf acknowledged he'd abused people around him, stemming from an issue with alcohol abuse, but he denied those specific allegations from FKA Twigs. Other previous ex-girlfriends of LaBeouf have come forward with similar stories. According to Rolling Stone, the trial is set for 2023. As womenslaw.org notes, most civil domestic violence cases don't result in jail time. Robert Blake was a Hollywood veteran when he was cast as Mickey in MGM's Our Gang series, also known as Little Rascals, explains ABC News. He started acting when he was 5, and when he was 6, he was cast in the 1939 film Bridal Suite. He also went on to portray Perry Smith in the adaptation of Truman Capote's In Cold Blood, but his name will forever be tied to the strange, tragic saga of his wife's murder trial. In 2001, after a restaurant outing with Blake, Bonnie Lee Bakley was shot twice while sitting in her husband's car. The murder weapon was found in a dumpster nearby, reports A&E. According to People, Blake spent almost a year in jail prior to his trial. During the trial, 2 stuntmen accused Blake of hiring them as hitmen, but their reputability was later doubted, per history. Blake was acquitted after the 3-month trial ended. 8 months later, however, he was sued by Bakley's estate and found intentionally liable for her death in a civil trial, and was ordered to pay $30 million. Bakley's death remains unsolved, per A&E. Lindsay Lohan had a great run as one of Hollywood's more successful child stars. starring in movie night classics such as The Parent Trap and Freaky Friday as a teen. She had a promising start in more adult roles with the 2004 film Mean Girls. But Lohan started struggling with the law in 2007 with a drunk driving charge, reports CNN. She was arrested again that year and sentenced to a day in jail, along with probation and community service hours. The next few years were littered with more court visits after violating her probation, missed counseling sessions, and missing court hearings. In 2010, she was sentenced to 90 days in jail after missing alcohol counseling sessions, but ended up only serving less than 2 weeks. Similar incidents continued until 2011, when Lohan stole a $2,500 necklace from a Venice jewelry store, but spent only 5 hours in custody after posting bail. She would later return to jail after being charged for the theft, but ultimately released to house arrest. In 2012, Lohan was arrested on assault charges at a New York City nightclub, per NBC, where she apparently was only in custody for a few hours. But by 2014, it seems that most of the legal issues that plagued her in the previous 8 years were over.
Revolution.
I was actually in solitary confinement for 14 days.
When he was a Disney Channel star, Orlando Brown played the loyal and happy-go-lucky Eddie Thomas on the channel's hit series That's So Raven, but his life took a sharp turn in the years since he hung up the mouse ears. In 2016, Brown was arrested and charged with domestic battery and drug possession, among other charges, eOnline reports. After Brown and his girlfriend pulled into a police department parking lot, they began fighting, and he physically assaulted her. Once in custody, police discovered that Brown was carrying meth and charged him with contraband possession, according to People. He served about a month in jail. According to eOnline and E! News, Brown was arrested in 2018 a few times for drug possession, domestic battery and resisting arrest, and burglary. He served 23 days for his drug and burglary charges, as per TMZ. He only spent a few hours in custody after being arrested for domestic abuse, reports News 1. Brown even appeared on Dr. Phil later that year to talk about his mental issues. By 2020, Brown seemed to have turned things around for himself. After participating in a Christianity-infused recovery program, he expressed excitement for called Rise Discipleship, the Christian Post explains. In his heyday, Jeremy Jackson watched girls in bikinis having fun in the sun as Hobie Buchanan on Baywatch, but behind the on-screen success was a drug addiction that aided in his downfall.
Dark times I am no stranger to.
He was hooked on a variety of drugs: marijuana, cocaine, ecstasy, speed, and crystal meth, which he confessed to on Child Star Confidential. By the time Jackson was an adult, he was involved in a series of strange crimes. He was imprisoned for 90 days when he was 19 for drug possession. Things got worse in 2015 when he was arrested for burglary and stabbing a man, reports TMZ. Jackson said the stabbing was done in self-defense because he was the one who was being burglarized, twice in one night. He wasn't charged, according to Us Weekly. However, that same year, Jackson was arrested for another stabbing. Jackson reportedly tried to steal a car from a man, and when the man's girlfriend tried to stop him, Jackson stabbed her, reports TMZ. He was sentenced to 270 days in jail, although he only had to serve 161 plus 5 years probation, per Us Weekly. Star Wars fans were not kind to Jake Lloyd. He was a child star, but only just. As the despised young Anakin Skywalker, he never managed to find the reverence fans had for other beloved characters, as he related in an interview with Sydney's The Daily Telegraph. Although it wasn't Lloyd's fault, he seemed to bear the brunt of that dislike. It wouldn't be surprising if he were traumatized by the experience, and it also didn't help that he was forced to do 60 interviews a day as an 8-year-old. He retired from acting by the time he was 12, and as an adult, he developed a deep aversion to the franchise. But adulthood hasn't been kind to him either. In 2015, when he was 26 years old, Lloyd led a high-speed car chase from law enforcement for 25 miles, reports Entertainment Weekly. As a result, 4 charges were made against him. He spent nearly a year in jail after failing to post bond and was eventually transferred to a psychiatric facility, as reported by TMZ. According to his mother, Lloyd has schizophrenia, and in recent years, it seems more people are rightfully acknowledging Lloyd's unfair treatment by Star Wars fans, including Mark Hamill, according to New York Magazine.
Today I want to talk about a controversial topic.
Amanda Bynes began her showbiz career on Nickelodeon with the show All That and her very own sketch comedy show, The Amanda Show, for CNN. She was a comedic prodigy, having performed at the Laugh Factory when she was 10 years old. She also had a blossoming film career as an adult with the series What I Like About You and the films Hairspray and She's the Man. But everything seemed to spiral in 2012. with a string of charges related to driving under the influence and hit-and-run incidents, as described by The Hollywood Reporter. In 2013, she was charged with a felony after being caught with drug paraphernalia, which she then dumped out of a window to discard the evidence, explained CNN. She spent a night in central booking, reports Entertainment Weekly. She was placed under an involuntary psychiatric hold and spent 4 months at a treatment facility, per CNN. Her parents were granted a legal conservatorship over her, which lasted for 9 years and ended in 2022, as reported by CBS News. Bynes' outlook has improved in recent years. As of 2022, she was studying for her bachelor's degree at the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising and has been vocal about her past struggles with drug abuse, reports Variety. Edward Furlong made his name in Hollywood with the 1991 blockbuster sequel Terminator 2: Judgment Day as John Connor, Sarah Connor's son, per CNN, and later starred in CSI New York. But as with many child stars, Furlong began having legal troubles when he came of age. In 2001, he was hospitalized for a suspected heroin overdose, notes USA Today. After a few years of relative peace, in 2004, he was charged with public intoxication while at a grocery store in Kentucky and served 45 minutes in custody, per UPI. In 2009, he was arrested on domestic assault charges against his wife and spent time at a psychiatric facility, per E, and was arrested sometime afterward for violating a restraining order to keep him from her, per USA Today. According to the Los Angeles Times, he only spent a few hours in custody after making bail. This behavior continued in 2012, when he was held for less than 12 hours and released on $50,000 bail for another domestic violence charge, via TMZ. However, in 2013, he was sentenced to 6 months in jail for violating his probation and a restraining order related to the 2012 charge, as per ABC. After getting out of jail, another arrest was made in 2013 after he violated his girlfriend's protection order, as reported by CNN. He was charged that time with domestic violence and battery, but avoided jail time after making a deal with the prosecution, reports the Toronto Sun. His criminal history became an issue in 2019 when it was reported that he could make a return to the Terminator franchise, according to The Hollywood Reporter. Nonetheless, the surprise announcement was warmly received by fans at the San Diego Comic-Con.
Anton Yelchin got his start in acting at an early age, booking his first TV role in a 2000 episode of ER, before delivering a memorable performance in the film Hearts in Atlantis. Yelchin successfully navigated the often tricky transition to adult roles, most notably portraying Pavel Chekhov in the Star Trek film franchise.
I can do that! I can do that!
Yelchin's star was on the rise when he was killed in a freak accident involving his vehicle in 2016. TMZ was the first to report that his body was discovered pinned between a mailbox and the security gate in front of his home by his SUV, which had rolled down an incline while in neutral. Yelchin's parents filed a lawsuit against the vehicle's manufacturer, Fiat Chrysler, claiming that the vehicle's gear shifters were responsible for the fatal accident. Indeed, just a couple of months earlier, the company had recalled more than 1 million vehicles due to confusing gear shifters that led drivers to think their vehicles were in park when they were actually in neutral, resulting in numerous accidents. That was precisely what had happened to Yelchin when he exited the vehicle to punch in the security code. One of the biggest child stars of the 1980s, Gary Coleman played wisecracking Arnold Jackson on hit sitcom Different Strokes. Coleman had suffered health problems from an early age due to nephritis, a congenital defect of the kidney. As a result, he required dialysis throughout his life and had undergone 2 kidney transplant operations, one at the age of 5 and another when he was a teenager. Given his chronic medical issues, Coleman's life expectancy was shortened, and in his later years he experienced some well-publicized health scares, including a seizure in February 2010 while on the set of The Insider. Just a few months later, the 42-year-old actor suffered a serious fall at his home just outside of Provo, Utah. Coleman was rushed to a nearby hospital where doctors determined that he'd suffered an intracranial hemorrhage. Coleman was conscious when he first arrived at the hospital, but eventually slipped into a coma. He was placed on life support, which was discontinued soon after. In a statement, a spokesperson revealed that friends and family were at his side when the life support was terminated. A popular child actor in her native Britain, Maya Alicia Naylor experienced early success as star of the kids' show Tatty's Hotel, before going on to appear in films such as Cloud Atlas and Code Red. From 2014 until 2018, she was a cast member on the popular British series Millie in Between. She was just 16 years old when she died under tragic circumstances. A subsequent inquest determined that she died by hanging and categorized her death to have been caused by, quote, misadventure rather than death by suicide. E! News obtained the coroner's report in which the assistant coroner came to conclude that Naylor's death had been accidental. Her father, Martin Naylor, concurred when he testified at the inquest, stating, "She had not been her normal self. She was stressed about her exams. I honestly believe she was just making some sort of point. I genuinely believe she did not mean to do it." J. Madison Wright was just 9 years old when she made her on-screen debut in a 1994 episode of Grace Under Fire, before guest starring in the Fran Drescher sitcom The Nanny. Later that year, she was cast in the NBC sci-fi series Earth 2, which ran for just one season. She continued acting for a few more years, making her final appearance in the 1998 comedy Safety Patrol. Wright was forced to put her acting career on pause after an X-ray revealed her heart was dangerously enlarged. She was diagnosed with restrictive cardiomyopathy, a condition in which the muscles in the heart's lower chamber become rigid and won't fill with blood. In 2000, 15-year-old Wright underwent a life-saving heart transplant and subsequently became a vocal advocate for organ donation. In 2006, she married Brent Joseph Morris. One day after the newlyweds returned from their honeymoon to their home in Lexington, Kentucky, Wright had a fatal heart attack. She was just 21 years old at the time of her death. In 1982, 10-year-old Samantha Smith had been watching TV shows about the Cold War, horrified by the idea of nuclear war. She wrote a letter to Soviet leader Yuri Andropov, asking what plans he had to avoid it from happening. The letter made her a sensation in Russia, and in 1983, she and her parents were invited to visit Moscow. Her popularity also exploded in her homeland. In 1984, she hosted her own TV special, Samantha Smith Goes to Washington, Campaign 84, interviewing various American politicians. She then went on to dabble in acting, guest starring on Charles in Charge, and playing a recurring role in the TV series Lime Street. In August 1985, Smith and her father were returning to their home in Maine after she'd been shooting Lime Street. They were flying in a small commuter plane when the aircraft crashed while attempting to land, killing them both. Oddly enough, Smith's death sparked a conspiracy theory in the Soviet Union, which claimed that she'd been assassinated by the CIA because her childish efforts to avoid nuclear war didn't align with America's aggressively anti-Soviet policy at the time. The R-Gang shorts from the 1920s and 30s, later renamed The Little Rascals, featured many memorable characters. Among the most beloved characters was Alfalfa, played by child actor Carl Switzer. As Switzer grew older, acting roles dwindled and he found himself typecast. Relegated to low-budget B-movies and bit parts, he made ends meet by tending bar and hiring himself out as a hunting guide. He also bred dogs as a sideline, and in 1959, Switzer sold a dog to a fellow named Moses Stilts and believed that he still owed him $50. Switzer had been drinking when he showed up on Stilts' doorstep, demanding that the debt be repaid immediately. According to Stilts, Switzer burst into his home and a scuffle ensued, during which Switzer pulled a knife. Stilts, however, one-upped the former child star when he pulled out a gun and ended the altercation by shooting Switzer dead. Stilts was put on trial, and his claims that he acted in self-defense were upheld by the coroner's report. The jury agreed that he had been defending himself and deemed Switzer's death to be a justifiable homicide. Best known as Darla in The Little Rascals during the 1930s and 40s, Darla Hood shone in the role. Hood continued her acting career into the 1950s as a series regular on The Ken Murray Show. She went on to experience success as a singer, and she also did voiceover work for TV commercials, singing jingles for Campbell's Soup and Chicken of the Sea Tuna. Hood was just 48 years old when she died in 1979 after undergoing a routine operation to remove her appendix. An autopsy subsequently revealed that she received a transfusion of tainted blood during surgery and had inadvertently been infected with hepatitis, which led to heart failure. Just 5 years old when she was discovered, Judith Barcy had a successful run as a child actor. Barcy was cast in dozens of commercials before going on to appear in numerous TV series and films, including Jaws: The Revenge, and providing the voice of young dinosaur Ducky in the animated hit The Land Before Time. Sadly, the young actor's life was cut short in 1988 when 10-year-old Barcy was found dead in her home alongside her mother and father, Maria and Joseph Barcy. Joseph had killed his wife and daughter, shooting them both with a .32 caliber pistol. After setting the bodies on fire, he fatally shot himself. Subsequent reports pointed out that there were plenty of warning signs indicating Barcy was being continually abused by her father. A posthumous Los Angeles Times expose quoted a relative who claimed that when Barcy left for Barbados to film the Jaws sequel, her father threatened to slash her throat if she didn't return. As her parents' marriage deteriorated, Barcy became so stressed by her father's threats of violence that she plucked out all her eyelashes.
I wish that Daddy'd stop shouting at Mommy.
She told family and friends how terrifying her home life had become, allegedly saying, "I'm afraid to go home. My daddy is drunk every day and I know he wants to kill my mother."